bolted up to the thrashing machine, and again, if you all want to have a look down in where the thrasher is, you'll see Bremer House's engine driving the thrasher.
But it wasn't just thrashing, was it? It could have been granite crushing, it could have been timber sawing,
stone,
yeah,
thrashing, chaff cutting, baling, you name it, water pumping. In fact, the next engine we have, a Marshall 8 horsepower traction engine owned by Chris and Laura Lawson from Gillingham in Dorset. This engine, I'm just amazed what Chris and Laura have done to it over the years. Came back from Australia as a pile of pieces, and I think anybody with any real sense would have not ever put it back together. But they worked for years and years, I believe it was 7 or 8 years, did nothing else other than rebuilding this engine to the lovely standard you see it there now. And that engine worked in Australia in a mining area, opal mining area, pumping water. And also another great credit to them, the lad that's driving it is Charlie. Charlie's only aged 14, and by chance he came to a show just like this, got talking to Chris and Laura, had a love of steam. Here we have the next generation, the future. Yeah, that is the future. Yeah. People like Charlie and Chris and Laura giving these people a chance. So any of you young people would like to learn about steam after this, go and have a word with them. They'll all let you get up on the engine.
3 rollers.
Yes, now we have another Aveling and Porter steamroller. That's come from Burley. Again, you would have seen these 100 years ago repairing and making all the roads. We could do some of them now, repairing the roads. That engine is owned by John Neary from Burley, and if you're about at the end of September, they have their own event in the village of Burley.
So would these have been owned by the council or by contractors?
Some of the steamrollers were owned by private people, contractors, and also estates.
Estates?
Yeah.
So for the farm tracks and things like that? Absolutely.
Followed by another Aveling and Porter steamroller, again now painted green. Green was the main colour from Aveling and Porter, but if you had an engine built to your own specification, you could have it painted any colour. And again, followed by an early Aveling roller called Lydia. Again, just coming along at a lovely steady pace. Again, another traction engine built by Foster's of Lincoln, owned by the Tricky family from just outside of Litchett in Dorset. Here we have a very early example, and some of you here will know Dave Tricky. He's quite famous for singing. And he sells
letting off steam.
And letting off steam. Actually, his group's called Raising Steam. And again, the Tricky family have owned that engine for 15 or so years, so it's been seen at lots of local events. Now here we have a Fowler made of Leeds, owned by the Farwell family from Blandford. You will see their lorries about everywhere and their diggers and whatever, big plant family. Matt Farwell driving it.
So that came under its own steam, didn't it? Last night.
Yeah,
saw it coming in.
Most of them, yeah. That's part of the fun, is getting out on the road, and some of the engines just have a tendency to want to stop at the pumps. But this engine, Matt, who's driving it, brought it back from New Zealand a few years ago. So again, an engine
on the trailer in the middle. But they would have come in when, 1890, something like that?
A little bit later than that.
Just a little bit later.
Yeah. So just listen to that power. Matt's opening up the regulator. There we go. A true road loco.
And the caravan, the living van on the back, what was that, an office or?
That was a work where everybody used to live out in the fields. That is made, again, that living van's made by Fowler of Leeds. Would have an incredible, interesting history. Some of the living vans would sleep a team of up to 6 men.
Would they really?
Yes.
And stoves in so they could cook in there and everything?
Yep. Stoves, no fridges in those days. Fresh rabbits, fresh beer off the farm.
Cider. Farwell.
And again, another Farwell-owned engine, a single-cylinder Fowler traction engine. Again, this engine worked up on the Wiltshire-Berkshire borders all its life. A beautiful example here of a lovely bowler. Again, just so typical of what would have been used up on the Salisbury plains for thrashing and haulage on some of the bigger farms.
And the ribbed wheels to get them over the rough ground.
That's been added in preservation ties.
Has it?
Yes. Now we're followed here by a Sentinel steam wagon. This one, as you can see, was owned originally by the W.J. Kings of Bishop's Lydeard. Huge hauliers down in Somerset. Had a fleet of steam wagons, steamrollers, they had Foden wagons, Sentinels, they had just about all sorts. And I remember back in the 80s and we're being followed by the Foden steam wagon, which was owned by the King family, and all these engines had been laid up and they were derelict. That Foden wagon came out of the Nettles and there was just a few parts. I went there at the time to try and buy one myself. I went with about £4,000. White family from down near Southampton, and this is an earlier version, probably about 1910.
What sort of speeds could they get up to?
This one I would imagine would do sort of 10 or 12 miles an hour, whereas the first Foden could possibly do 18 to 20 miles an hour. Now, that Foden's followed by a Roby steam tractor, again a small estate type tractor, as we talked about earlier on. That's owned by the Parker family just down the road at Ringwood. Roby, if you look at the side of the cylinder block, were made up in Lincolnshire again. There's a lot of manufacturers up in Lincolnshire.
And this showman's vehicle?
Yeah, here we have a beautiful, beautiful original example of a Burrell Showman's engine called the Griffin, and possibly the White Rose of York, again had two names, possibly due to several owners, different times. This one's come up from Cornwall for your pleasure. Then they would have powered the rides and all the side stalls.
And the garish colours to attract them to the rides.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that looks like the end of the parade, and if we've got time, what we're doing is
we've got time
to some of the owners, and they can tell you a little bit more about the history of them.
It's a real labour, isn't it? It's a real labour.
Came into agriculture at a time when steam was coming out, finishing, and he had a real love of steam. In fact, he was one of the people that got the Dorset Steam Fair going. So we always had engines on the farm, and I've tried to shake it off. No.
And in their immaculate condition, everything has a value, but they are changing serious money, aren't they?
Yeah, they are serious money, and I think if you talk to a lot of the people here, money doesn't really count. It's once you've got the engine, it's the passion and the pleasure it gives you.
Certainly is. Yeah, money doesn't. It can't buy you this, can it?
Well, it can buy them, but it's
got to get into the heart. It's got to get into the soul.
It's definitely a heart and a soul thing. Steam is a living, breathing machine. It's as close to the human body as you can get a steam engine.
And when you have to restore them, you're really looking for a decent price.